and Social Gerontology at the University of Manchester, where he also co-directs the Manchester Institute for Collaborative Research on Ageing. While Chris is setting himself up, I can also say that he spent a number of years as Professor of Applied Social Sciences and as Professor of Social Gerontology at Keele, and he's also a Fellow of the British Gerontological Society. And I understand that Chris is going to offer the first of two bite-sized introductions on ageing and the environment.
Brilliant. Okay, I've only got 15 minutes, so I'm going to dive straight into this. Terribly important, so I don't go into anybody's time. So what I'm going to do is just sketch the background to the idea of age-friendly cities and kind of use that as the kind of paradigm around which the discussions you're having should be built. Briefly look at some of the research on ageing and the environment, particularly in relation to cities. I've got a slide on the advantages, which I feel very passionately about, in terms of the nature of urban environments and older people. But then I've got this strategy which I've been working on to try and convince you about, around which you might think about developing your dementia-friendly communities. So just a background to age-friendly communities, age-friendly cities, and many of you in the room I think will be aware of this concept, so I'm going to chase through this relatively quickly. Developed by the World Health Organization in the early 2000s, and it was part of the WHO EU drive towards the idea of active ageing, encouraging maximum participation within all environments. And I think there are, as the WHO developed it, it looked through focus groups and various other things. It established first this checklist and guide, which was produced through a whole range of focus groups run across the global north and south. It launched subsequently to this global network of age-friendly cities, and there are now, the latest figure I was able to get is about 200 communities and cities involved in that network. So I guess most of you will have access to some sort of, may already be participating in one. And there have been major international conferences devoted to this theme, at which the issue of dementia-friendly communities has been discussed. And again, as many of you are aware, I think, there are these 8 dimensions to an age-friendly city. And I'm not going to go through all the details, but I think many of these dimensions, of course, are going to be discussed through the day in terms of the importance of outdoor spaces, which Catherine's going to talk about. Really important issue of transportation, housing, social participation, and so on. And I guess the kind of issue since this list was developed has been how to apply that within the complex environments within which people live. And that's what I really want to kind of address now. And those of you who haven't come across this before, of course, can just go onto the WHO website or one or two other websites, and I've got some kind of list of sources at the end. So what about research on cities and older people, particularly in relation to the environments in which they live? Why is this an important area? I think that the really crucial research issue here is that 80% of the time people, 70 and over, is spent within the home environment. So the impact on the home environment of problems in that environment, difficulties within that environment, have a major impact on the lives of people. And that's why what we're discussing, I think, is so important in terms of addressing environmental issues. Also, I think we've got this very interesting tension now within many urban environments between, on the one hand, older people as the first generation, probably, who've aged in place, or preceding generations, in the sense of highly mobile. You know, they were like fish in the sea, constantly moving around. This older generation is very unusual in that for most of you, you'll be living in environments where you'll have aged in place. And that's unusual historically. And so the idea of people spending 40 years in the same neighbourhood, the same home, you know, is not unusual. But that's juxtaposed with high levels of mobility within many of those communities, in terms of the younger populations moving in and out with great rapidity. And I think that's, you know, one of the challenges we face in building age-friendly communities, dementia-friendly communities, is that difference between those two kinds of communities. Worth a thought, I think. The other issue which comes out, I think, in research is issues about fear of crime, feelings of insecurity. British Crime Survey, the Belgian Aging Survey, found 33%, 50% of people 60 and over feeling unsafe moving around their environment at night, but even during the day in particular places. Neighbourhoods with poor physical environments and limited access to services, again from our research, may increase feelings of insecurity and vulnerability. Striking finding, I think, from a number of surveys. This idea also of institutional disengagement has, I think, become quite important, where people are living in communities where facilities retreat, withdraw, and the community feels a sense of abandonment by mainstream facilities. So that idea that institutional disengagement can come alongside people's increase in people's needs for particular kinds of facilities. I'd also add to this, in terms of some of the issues about the impact of the environment, the importance of bringing together issues of climate change, extreme weather conditions, and vulnerabilities of older populations. And we've got, you know, a number of studies now of problems of extreme weather conditions, heat in Chicago and France, and of course the disastrous tsunami in Japan. So the idea of thinking about the vulnerability of some of our populations within the context of climate change, I think is a really important issue. On the other hand, I think there are these big advantages of urban environments for older populations. The infrastructure of public facilities, and here we might kind of draw out public affluence on the one side, the great galleries, museums, concert halls, theatres and so on, other facilities which are in cities, which we need to open out to different groups of older people. And on the other side, the much more kind of privatised way in which we're developing services. So I think that, you know, there is this great infrastructure which great cities like have, which, you know, we can open out to different groups. Specialist resources for minority groups, which may be particular importance for ethnic minority groups, but others as well. Again, you get those in urban environments. And also perhaps the other feature, I think, of an urban environment, which is important for this discussion, is a broader range of social networks. We're not restricted. We need to think, particularly in relation to dementia-friendly communities, about the importance of drawing on strangers and neighbours as well as friends and family. Okay, so what I want to suggest then, out of that brief tour, is a strategy for developing age-friendly cities. And I'm going to develop the idea of the social city, that before we can think about dementia-friendly communities, we need to have a social city. We need to develop rights to the city which reflect changing needs across the life course. And we need to develop strategies for creating connections within cities. And I would argue that before you try and make the case for dementia-friendly communities, you have to satisfy these conditions, or else the debate is entirely abstract. So for me, what's a social city? Well, a social city promotes connections between people, and I'll come back to that. Crucially, it argues that social development is as important as physical development. And I think for too long we've had a debate where physical regeneration has dominated and less attention has been paid to the social relationships which must be put at the forefront of why we intervening in urban environments, why we rebuilding urban environments. We have to think of them in social terms. And we have to recognise the way, I think, cities are built and developed can help or hinder social connections. That's extremely important. So my first argument is that thinking about age-friendly communities, age-friendly cities, dementia-friendly communities, they have to have a social dimension. Self-evident. You don't need a professor to tell you that. But there may be other things that you do need a professor for. I don't know. You do need to go with that. And I could have put this first, I guess. You do need to develop rights to the city. And here I think within urban sociology, political sociology, there's been a very interesting debate about the concept of rights to the city. And for me, this is extremely important to link with the debate about age-friendly cities and dementia-friendly communities. And I've been critical of the WHO for not linking the two and for making age-friendly communities a rather abstract concept. So we have to ensure the full rights of older people as urban citizens, or citizens of whichever community they live in. I mean, all of this can apply to rural communities, obviously. We have to address the rights of people as citizens within their communities as fundamental to making sure they're secure as individuals. And I've got three ways in which I think we should do that. We have to establish a right to appropriate and supportive urban space. We have to establish a right to participate in decision-making surrounding the production of urban space, or any type of space. And we have the right to shape strategies for urban planning and regeneration. And my argument would be that you have to insert this debate about dementia-friendly communities within those set of rights. And I think there's potentially an exciting agenda to address there. And within that, you see, I put this third point, which I think is very important. How do we create connections within cities? I think, within any environment, I think this is what a lot of the debate is about. That we're trying to create connections between the different groups, many of whom are vulnerable in different ways within our environments. And I think there are three kind of areas here. One is the discussion about public space, and I think Catherine is going to talk about that. But you know, we are having a lot of interesting initiatives in areas like parks, libraries, becoming more aware of local spaces, street space, which I think we're also going to talk about. But then there's a kind of more private space, and you know, this interesting concept of third spaces in cafes and other kinds of spaces, which we need to think about making those more open, more dementia friendly. And on that, it's very interesting in America that there was a fierce debate by elderly Koreans who were kicked out of a McDonald's, I think it was in Boston, because they were seen as taking up too much time in this McDonald's, just sitting around for the day, drinking their coffee and having a good time. And they fought a great campaign to restore the right to sit around for as long as they like in the third spaces of their choosing. And I think, this is a great thing. But it's an important lesson that we don't own the spaces around Glasgow or wherever. They're owned by others. So all of this debate about creating age-friendly spaces is premised on us taking control and influencing those spaces. And I think finally of course, this issue, which is crucial, of local participation and empowerment, resident control over neighbourhood change. Now, I just finished, though, with these thoughts that I think we now have an agenda there. We have a series of strategies, which I think I would urge you to kind of think about in terms of building dementia-friendly communities, building more social spaces, building more connections between spaces, and building rights for the city. And I think we can start on this by working with neighbourhoods. We've started to do this in Manchester. I've been working with two architects, working to get myself as a social scientist, working with architects and trying to apply the WHO principle to a local neighbourhood, and having groups of older people talk about the kind of community they'd like to see evolve, and developing age-friendly audits, running focus groups, talking to urban designers and planners, about the kind of community in which people want to live. And so I think there's a great amount of work, great set of work that we can develop here. And my last slide, but I'll just say something about some of the literature here. Just three issues from my point of view, I think comes from this. Firstly, I do think this issue about how we nurture informal spaces is important. From my point of view, it's all very well talking about age-friendly cities or age-friendly environments, but a lot of people feel they're actually quite hostile environments in terms of the kind of spaces which people go into. So I didn't see that. So I think this whole area of thinking about community space is really quite an exciting one. I think you have to look, depending on where you come from, certainly the community where I live near, there are a lot of vacant spaces, disused buildings, which I think have a big impact on the community, on how the community feels about itself. Many of those buildings, of course, have big memories for people, elderly people, people with dementia who remember them in particular kinds of ways. So I think thinking about space, I think, is terribly important, and the memories which it conveys to people. And of course we have to think about future-proofing our cities. And I think the only issue here, the big issue here, is how do we get at the same table, sit down with developers. We need to have developers in these discussions. They're the ones who are kind of influencing the development of the production of our cities. And it's all very well us having a great day talking about producing dementia-friendly cities. If the developer down the road is, producing plans for a city which is, quite the contrary to the grand aspirations and ideals that we have. So I think, it's quite a challenge that we've got there. Just a bit on the, there is this report, Stephen White and his colleagues' Age-Friendly Neighbourhood Report, which you will be able to download, actually, I think, on the Manchester University website, but ask me about it. And there's also a new report, a relatively new report report last year from REBA called Silver Linings, the Active Third Age and the City, which is quite an interesting view about how kind of architects are viewing these areas. And Sophie Handler has written a research and evaluation framework for age-friendly cities, which both of those have just come out. And if you go onto the Manchester University Micro website, they'll be on there in a week or so's time. Okay, so that's it.